Nasty Nate got the nasty beard going.
Yeah.
You changed your number on me, bro?
What the fuck is up, Nate? Man,
Did you change your number?
Dude, yes, my number's changed.
Oh, okay.
Yes, it is. I'll send you my number, but it was a fucking. I was with Mandus on my goddamn phone. I lost the number.
How do you lose a number?
Man. Dumb shit, dude. It's gone.
Is there a woman involved?
No. I was gonna say, sounds like a chick's involved, dude.
Yeah, my sister. Listen, my sister though, so it wasn't anything like that, you know. My sister had a baby. You wouldn't believe the story if I fucking told you, you know. But whatever.
Prince.
Gotta let it come to me real quick. Andrew, how you doing, man? You kick back over there, man. Just relax.
Good, George. Good, George. How you doing, brother?
I'm all right, man. All right. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, we are back with another episode of the King's Court. Today we got a loaded panel. Talk about some good things as always. I'm also joined by my co-host, Mandus Buckle. Mandus, what up?
What's happening, George? Man, you got a unique panel here for the King's Court.
Yes, I do, man. First of its kind. And, you know, that's how we like to do things around here. So let's let everybody introduce themselves real quick. Kick it off with Andrew. Drew, what up?
Hey, George. I'm Andrew Barry. I'm a prep coach based out of Shelmer, Vermont. Been competing in the NPC since 2004 and have athletes in the NPC and IFBB.
Nate Spear here, national level competitor, super heavyweight. Also do some reporting for MMR. And then I also run the Bodybuilding by Bodybuilders group. So what's up, guys?
Nate, it's been too long since we have you on.
That's nasty.
Welcome back.
I'm in the shadows. Come in every now and then.
I'm Justin Randell from Blackstone, Massachusetts. I'm an IFBB 212 pro. I do some coaching as well. I coach athletes in the NPC and a few in the IFBB.
I'm Sid Rai. I'm the little brother of the group. Been competing since 2017. Did junior nationals last year. Did all right, but need to get better. Thanks for having me.
And Sid, you're another admin in Bodybuilding by Bodybuilding too, aren't you? Yeah.
Yes, sir. The group.
Yeah, you and Nate do a bang up job in there, man. I don't think people realize that thing's been going strong for a couple of years now, actually. So congratulations on all the work you guys have been doing.
Sid's pretty much the reason why we're all sitting here chatting today.
Yeah.
Almost.
Exactly.
He has good conversation pieces.
So where did that topic start? Sid, I believe you're the one who brought up in the group. Was it yesterday or the day before?
Yeah, I think it was yesterday. I've been watching a couple of videos. I like Dave Colombo's channel. And he had a video about Bob Gruskin, the original guru, passed away about a week ago. And that just got me thinking about who those original gurus were and who some of the best prep coaches are, like, in the field right now. And then Mandus, you raised a good question of, like, a Mount Rushmore of coaches, you know? And so I think that's why we're here, right?
Absolutely. So I'm sure Kyle's now going to put up a funny image of Mount Rushmore. And so let's start putting the faces in. Let's start with is there a name that we all feel automatically should be up there? And I'll start with the first name that I can think of, that I think, regardless of what our opinions and topics are, this person automatically makes that Mount Rushmore top 4. This doesn't mean that this is the best coach, but simply by his record in all sports, what are some of the criteria we look at? Well, winning. You know, if you look at Phil Jackson, there were years where people said Phil Jackson had Michael Jordan and then Phil Jackson had Kobe Bryant. He wasn't that great of a coach, but at the end of the day, it's all about W's and championships. And with that criteria, I think the person, in my opinion, that there is no question is Hany. And it's just because the amount of total titles he has is so many more than the next person that he's an automatic on Mount Rushmore of coaches. Go ahead, take it away, fellas.
I think my
well, I mean,
go ahead, Nate.
I was just going to say what. So just with Hany, I mean, he gets a lot of flack, but I mean, the thing about bodybuilding is it's in my opinion, it's like how the guys show up on the day of the show, right? So, I mean, at least I know he has like a little bit of flack from like his bottom level guys, but all his top guys always come in. They peak perfectly, pretty on the money. I mean, obviously with, Phil, and then, I mean, people say, Jay worked with Aceto first, but I mean, in my opinion, my favorite look was Jay in 2009, and Chris is a great coach, but he tends to bring in guys a little bit fuller. And I always go with the peeled look. And honestly, Jay's look in 09 was my favorite because he came in just sharp as hell, you know what I mean? And just dry, crisp. So he brings, I think, a little bit different of a look. And I respect that in a lot of different levels. And then even with, guys like Jeremy, we're talking bodybuilding, but and also with Hany, now that he's gotten his, camp, Hany comes in, bang on every time just about.
Yeah, Hany's the guy who gets a lot of flack, cherry picking, getting a lot of more genetically gifted guys. But you talk about range. The guy had Phil Heath, who's 7-time Mr. Olympia champion. He had Jeremy Buendia, who's a 4-time physique champion. He's got Nicole Wilkins, who's 4 times figure Olympia.
Yeah, 4.
And that's across genders, it's across divisions, so that's success right there. And then we talk about his earlier career, from like the 2000s, early 2000s, late 2000s. This guy was like running the NPC. He was turning everybody pro. That's where he got the name, right? Pro creator. Back when it was really difficult to get that pro card, he was bringing guys in, win national, win USAs. And so I think he's fallen off a little bit lately just because he's maybe not as focused on coaching. He's got his Evogen nutrition business. And so that's why you don't see him as much now in 2020 after like 2015. But he's still somebody who you have to respect.
Yeah, I don't know if I would say I wouldn't qualify Hany as a current coach anymore because he only has one guy. But that doesn't take away from his resume. And his resume says he's the best based on wins. Now, again, I'm not saying he is necessarily the best of all time, but I think he's unequivocally top 4 again, just based on the criteria of how many championships he has. And at the end of the day, in any competitive sport, in any competition period, a spelling bee, checkers, chess, baseball, football, basketball, bodybuilding, doesn't matter what it is, wins at the highest level is the most important thing. It's number 1 on a criteria list, isn't it? And with that being said, I just don't think that there's any way to leave him off of that list.
Yeah, I agree with that. Going along with, what Nate said and how, you really never see any of his top level competitors miss on stage. They're always dry. They're always crisp. I think the number one thing that I think of in a coach is their eye. And people can make the argument, these top coaches, like let's say here we're talking about Hany, Chris Aceto, all of them, they get the cream of the crop athletes. Well, you still have to know what the hell you're doing to have those people consistently dialed in show after show. We could give Phil Heath to, a quote unquote low level coach. He's not going to look the same. He's a genetic freak. But it takes knowing what to do. It takes having the eye to know what their best is, knowing what they need to look like on the Olympia stage. So I think that's something that goes, underestimated.
Justin, it's funny, again, it's just like the Phil Jackson argument it was in basketball in the 90s and 2000s. Name me a top 5 Olympian in any division who's not a genetic freak.
Exactly.
So that's a moot point, to say the top coaches in the industry get the top athletes. Well, why are they getting the top athletes? Because they're the top coaches.
Exactly.
Right?
To piggyback off of what Justin said, William Bonac is a perfect example because people would think before he's perfect, he's so easy to peak and this and that. He has not looked the same since he left Neil Hill. So
he's a perfect example. Perfect example.
Yeah. All right, so who else do we got? Andrew, who do you got on that list? So are we in agreement that Hany is definitely on that list of top 4?
Yeah, I think so. I'll give a counter argument against it, but then I'll counter my counter argument with 1-4. So I think obviously we all know he misses with Phil a lot on Friday night, for the prejudging. But to Justin's point, he has that eye and he knows how to make Mr. Saturday Night look like the shit. And every time Phil comes back looking better. So I'll say maybe he underfeeds him or he doesn't account for Phil's stress going into, the Olympia prejudging, but he knows what it takes and what to do with him over, the hours of Friday night, Saturday morning, Saturday day to bring him in to kind of put that stamp on it come Saturday night. So, I'd definitely put Hany up there. I think to me though, I just think the all-time best is probably Chris Aceto, because when you see pictures of somebody that look, the day before show and they look like they're 4 weeks out and then they show up on stage and they look like they're ready. I've just seen so many pictures from friends and stuff sending me pictures. I know Justin probably has too, of guys that look like they're 3-4 weeks out. And then you see them the day of the show and they look just as good, just as tight. I think that means he knows what to do with diuretics, better than probably anybody in the sport. We always say you can't diuretic the fat off, but I think somehow Chris Aceto does. What do you guys think?
I'm completely on board with that, Andrew, because one of the main guys is Jose Raymond. I've seen Jose pose. I've seen Jose pose in the locker room 5 weeks out. Then I've seen him pose 2 weeks out, and it's insane.
Yeah.
So I'd have to say Chris Aceto too. I agree.
So I'm 100% with you. I think Chris Aceto is the next person on that list. Chris Aceto is probably my personal favorite. It's not just from his eye. I see his interactions with his athletes, and I haven't personally seen another coach of any of the coaches that we're going to refer to in this segment that has the type of relationship with athletes past and present that Aceto does. There's something different that is happening there. And to me, that's a huge part of coaching. It also, to me, it speaks volumes of the character of the person. Again, not discrediting the character of anyone else. I'm just referring to what I have seen year after year after year, person after person after person. There's a genuine compassion and camaraderie and compatibility that he has with people that I haven't seen with other coaches. And that shows me a lot. Now, to the point of the diuretics, and you using Jose Raymond in particular, that's one of the areas that I might slightly disagree when it comes to Chris Aceto. Chris Aceto and Jose Raymond don't see eye to eye in their water protocols. So Jose and Aceto actually have lots, or from what I understand, have had multiple conversations on this, and they don't agree on the water protocol. So I don't know the different routes that they take. I do know that they're not on the same page when it comes to that. And for as good as Aceto is, I do think one of his small knocks is, for as much as he's on, we've seen a lot of guys be off because of his water protocols. So I think we see a lot of instances, Andrew, where, like you said, you see someone who is a few days out that we all thought, there's no way this guy's going to look good. And those are the instances where they nail it on the head. I've also seen more than my share of times where Aceto athletes were too flat, or, whatever the case was, and the water protocol did not work. But again, I have him as my favorite coach looking back, and I have him on a Mount Rushmore as well. Just a little differing of opinions on maybe one of the reasons there being the water protocol.
One thing cool about Chris is, like, you can always tell like Sid brought this topic too about like lineage. You can always tell someone that worked with Chris, and he sort of has passed his like his tools and the way he goes about things to other coaches. Like Sid's coach, Andrew Vu, you can once he said he worked with Chris, I sort of knew it. You know what I mean? You have this feeling, like same with like Dusty Hanshaw and Ron Partlow. They have like all these like close, even Jose, sort of like the way they go about things, like the simplicity. he sort of passes that down to other people. And I don't know another coach where you can sort of say, wow, you can tell that Chris had their hands on them as far as like what they know and their abilities as today. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, Chris and his pictures all the time, pictures in different lightings, pictures post-workout, pictures in the morning, like that is something you see. Andrew got that from him. I know a lot of people, a lot of his athletes like to joke about that, right? How many pictures he wants. He's just, I think the other thing is just, like Mandus said, those long-lasting relationships that he's built with his clients. I don't know if you see that with everybody, with all these coaches we're going to mention. You know, that doesn't really play into the matter of like whether he's the best coach, but it speaks to his personality and speaks to his nature. But what I find most impressive about Aceto is just his success across different eras. You know, because he came into prominence in the 90s, was a great prep coach then, great prep coach through the 2000s, and he's still killing it now, like in the 2010s and the he would have done really well this year too, but like if you look at last year's Olympia, he had like 5 guys in the Olympia, and he had 2 guys in the 212 Olympia, and they all look pretty good, you know, so he's still somebody who's still relevant for the past 30 years.
Is he maybe the best coach today?
Oh, I would definitely say he would be the best coach right now, yeah.
I mean, if we were ranking current active coaches, which is the second segment of what we're going to get into after Mount Rushmore, that's why, to me, I think Aceto, he doesn't have the titles that Hany does, but is his impact been greater? Like you said, three decades now, multiple books. We see him traveling globally. We see the impact that he has on you guys from the Northeast. You guys are like a cult following of Aceto. I'm not from the Northeast. I'm in the Midwest, and I feel like I'm as much of a fan as you guys are. We were sitting at the Arnold just a few months ago, and Chris and I were sitting next to each other having a conversation. I'm reporting for MMR, and Chris, I hope you're not upset. I could get a 1 or 2. I don't think it's secret, but I turn around and he's on the phone, and I'm assuming maybe he's on the phone with Palumbo or somebody. On the phone with Sergio. Sergio had just gotten off stage. You know how Sergio does the run off stage? Well, he ran to his phone, and Aceto was on the other line, and I turned around and I thought, wow. He's literally having a conversation with me, watching the show, doing his reporting for RX, all while calmly, because that's how you have to deal with Sergio, because we all know he gets a little amped up, as most guys do during a show, and he's calmly telling him on the phone what he needs him to do as he comes back around. Talk about as cool, calm, and collect as there is. I was flabbergasted and once again made me realize this guy is still learning and still doing his thing today.
And he never panics.
Cool thing about, yeah, exactly. Low stress. He also he seems like he makes everyone feel really calm. You know what I mean? He knows how to micromanage his athletes, like Sergio, and then maybe someone else that's a little bit different. He knows like each person, you know what I mean? Sort of how to manage that. And also too, it's cool to watch him because he also works with a lot of top amateur guys. He's not selective. Like I feel like Hany is very like picky, and that's why he doesn't have as big of numbers. Whereas Chris is like willing to work. If he sees something in someone, even an amateur, he'll work with them. You know what I mean? And it's pretty cool to see him like work with a little bit of everyone. You know what I mean? And classic physique right now, he's got a handful of guys in that too. You know.
My understanding also is that he, if you want to work with him, one of his other clients really needs to vouch for you. And give him like the heads up that this guy is going to be serious. So he takes his client's input that he really trusts pretty seriously. But also on the point about being calm and collected, I was going to say, I think he'd be successful in anything he does. I think, like we all know, like this bodybuilding thing is just kind of a part-time gig for him, even though he's as successful and makes as much money as he does off it. He's into the real estate and his other businesses. If he didn't waste his time on bodybuilding, he might be a Fortune 500 guy. He might be, like an executive somewhere. So I just think in his mind, he's just cool as a cucumber,
Yeah, I agree. So we're all in agreement. Aceto, second person automatically on that Mount Rushmore?
I think so.
Yeah,
Agreed.
yeah, definitely.
Okay. Now we're gonna start getting into some deep end of the water here. Nate?
No, I think we're still good, man.
Yeah.
Number 2 is still a pretty easy choice. Don't you think?
Yeah, I mean, Chad's pretty much the next in line, right?
I was gonna say that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just from his impact in the 90s, you know what I mean? And just everyone he worked with. I mean, obviously, Ronnie is, you know what I mean? His reign with Ronnie, I mean, you know what I mean? And then with Flex and worked with Nasser.
And his wife.
I mean, all the big names. Yeah, and his wife, exactly, yeah.
I mean, his
That's
wife
how-
was
that's
what,
how it
a
started, right?
5 or 6 time champion, I think. So
That's what sort of got him going, right? Just working with what he did with his wife. Which
yeah,
is pretty cool.
I think he definitely deserves a spot on that
Isn't
Rushmore list.
Wasn't there times where they said, and I don't have the exact statistics in front of me, Nate, Andrew, so one of you guys could probably correct me here, but wasn't there a point in time of like a 5-6 year run where he had 50% or more of the top
Like
10
the Olympia or the
guys
Arnold.
at the Olympia? So if you were a top bodybuilder, you were, from what I understand back then, before social media and before, you got a special package delivered to your house from Nichols. And supposedly this was your prep kit to the top 5 at the Olympia, you know, and I'm sure it was just some notes scribbled on there and right, and some cargo, right? That's all it was. But I mean, he was the be all end all at that time.
Yeah.
I don't know how many guys here are old enough to that spend some time on the Muscle Mayhem boards, but Mandus, were you ever a member on his site back in the day?
Mm-mm.
I mean, I spent probably 2 hours a day on that site from age of 16 until when he shut it down in 2004 or 5 or something like that. And he would have his top guys on there talking about protocols and things they did, and we're sitting there writing the stuff down like, I'm going to do that. As soon as I can save up to get some Increlex, I'm going to do that, So, I just think his impact on the industry, maybe not so much in 2020, isn't as big, but you can't deny from the 90s to Ronnie's reign and even a little bit after, he's been a major player in my mind. Yeah, he's definitely on that list as well.
Yeah, I agree.
I think we also have to take into consideration how, technology is advanced these days for current coaches. I mean, I think it was Chad who put a post up of Ronnie, this might have been a year or two ago, saying that he used to get those check-ins via Polaroid.
Yeah.
Mailed to his house, I think it was, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
That's totally different than what goes on these days, so
yeah,
it's good.
Well, we've all heard the story about how Jay used to drive 3.5 hours up to Maine to see Chris, strip down for 15 minutes of posing, have a meal, get back in the car and drive another 3.5 hours back down to Boston or Massachusetts area. So yeah, I think, the cell phones and the email and all the instant, whatever we have right now makes it a lot easier to coach and to, use your eyes.
Absolutely. So we got 3. We got
Yeah,
three
about
automatics.
Well, one more thing about Chad. I just want to say this.
Absolutely.
I heard an interview with him where he was talking about how when he would work with Flex and with Cormier, etc., and he would just know that they were going to cheat on their diet eventually. And so he would work that into their plans so that he would have a little bit of wiggle room, I think that being able to scale your plan and know your athlete's mindset and still bring them in like pretty decent is an exceptional coaching skill. You don't need if you can work with an athlete who's not going to give you perfect adherence and still get them into winning shape, I think that's a good coach.
I'd love to, Chad, if you happen to watch this, which you probably won't, but if you do, we'd love to hear you chime in the comments below. I think because of all the circumstances of that era, Sid, I think you hit it on the head. Chad Nichols is one of those. He was a cop. Like he's a very smart, street savvy, intellectual type of guy. Not just about the X's and O's, but about people and situations. And he's a great storyteller, telling things about. We all know Cormier and his old party life and some of the stuff with Wheeler. So Sid, like you're saying, the fact that he was anticipating things and looking into things, is that cutting edge? Is that way ahead of his time because he didn't have access to the things like we do now? He was delayed days and sometimes weeks before getting information. And again, like you said, Polaroid pictures. Can you imagine us trying to do that now? You know,
No.
how many coaches would be able to survive? So was he that far ahead of his time even in the fact that he was able to mesh a street savvy intellectual guy who understands people and mix the science while always being way behind gathering the information to be able to get these guys to look the way they did? I couldn't imagine any of us trying to work under those conditions today, and he made it seem like it was nothing. Chad, let us know if that played a role into what and how you thought and how you did things, because again, I can't imagine any of us trying to wait 4 days for a Polaroid picture to get in the mail to turn around and handwrite a note back to the guy 4 days later on the adjustments to make.
What about the international guys? That's like 2 weeks.
Yeah.
That's a really good foresight on his part, you
Right,
know, to be able to work the plan ahead for, you know. So.
And then there was one.
I think this one we're probably gonna all have different names for this one. I think those first three were kind of obvious, but this last one, I don't know. I mean, I can't even think of one that necessarily comes to my mind right now. I was planning on just agreeing with somebody else.
That's what I was
go with. I would say George Farah. I mean, Farah, just because like he was almost in the 2000s, almost like what Chad did. He worked with like Branch, DJ, and then obviously Dexter. He gets a lot of hate from a lot of people. Like, I don't really know the in-depth of that, but a lot of people sort of make fun of him. But
I think it's because he was one of those guys. I think it's because he was one of those guys that was kind of hanging backstage, like, "Hey, Chris brought you in flat. I can do this." Or Chad brought you in. He should have pulled that 3 weeks ago. I can do this different. You know, I think he was one of those guys. That's what I heard.
You want a pro card, brother?
Yeah, I think if we take all that out of it, how people feel about him, and actually analyze what he's done and his athletes, then that he might be up there too.
Plus, he lived it himself. I mean, he was a high-level bodybuilder himself. You know, I mean, I think that counts for something. You know.
Well, if we're just looking at their coaching resume, you know, yeah, Justin. I mean, we can't deny the success. Let's just look at his top three: Kai, Branch, and Dexter. You know, he's got a slew of other people, but that's his top three. That's
you got a couple Olympians and a couple Arnold Classics right there. So
and then we can even talk about, you know, obviously Dexter's record. Has Dexter been with George? This is what I don't know. Has Dexter been with George?
That was since 2012. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, Dexter was with somebody like for the first half, for the first 60%. He was with Farah. Yeah, what did you say, Sid? Since
I think it was 2012 is when he started.
Okay.
He went with Farah and then got the Olympia. No, I'm sure. Come with me, brother, if you want the Olympia title.
Stupid brother.
It's a tough one. I mean,
well, who else do we put up against him? I guess we could go.
Well,
who would be in contention with Farah?
This is a name that's kind of, I don't know if you guys have heard of him. He's the guy I mentioned at the start of the podcast. Bob Gruskin. Are you guys familiar?
Oh yeah. He trained Chris. He trained a lot of good coaches.
Yeah. So just like on Mount Rushmore, you know, you had George Washington, and he was the first president, right? And so the founder of like the prep coaching deal is Bob Gruskin. He was the original. You know, he was the guy who passed the knowledge down to Chris Aceto, and I think multiple other guys in that northeast area. I know Justin Miller is somebody who speaks very highly of him, having worked with him, and he's still an active and relevant coach today. This is off of that podcast I was talking about earlier with Palumbo in memorial of Gruskin, but a couple of back in like the early 90s, late 80s, when Gruskin was active, he was apparently working with all of the pros. Like Lee Haney was calling him. He was working with plenty of different top amateur guys. What's his name? John Defendis, who's a Mr. USA. He worked with him. He worked with a ton of different NABA athletes. He worked with Dennis James at one point.
Jerry Scalisi.
Jerry Scalisi, yeah. Jerry, man, how did I forget Jerry? Hell of a good guy. So all these different guys. I know the coaching game has evolved a lot since then, and there's a lot more coaches on the scene now. And a lot of his work was in NABA. It wasn't in IFBB. So it's not as relevant to the current bodybuilding landscape. But he's the founder, man, and you can trace his lineage all throughout bodybuilding today.
I don't disagree with that at all. I mean, he might not necessarily have, W's next to his name, but you can't deny his impact on the coaching tree or the sport in general, you know. If the guy that we're calling, Chris, one of the top coaches, says everything I learned was from this guy, I think he probably should be mentioned or at least thought of on that list, maybe looking over the Mount Rushmore, like looking down on the other guys,
Is there no other name?
Do we have another name to throw into this mix between these two? We got one spot and two names. Is there a third?
What about Milos?
You can't deny his contributions, at least to the chemical side of the sport and protocols, I think. I mean, he definitely, brought insulin in a sense and protocols of that nature, to the sport, at least on a wider level. But on the same token, we could also talk about like Dan Duchesne, who didn't necessarily coach athletes and bring them into shows necessarily, but he was willing to bring protocols and try this and that with particular, top bodybuilders. And I think a lot of people used him for advice, especially, out in the Gold's Gym era. So
see, I would have Neil Hill over Milos.
Oh yeah,
all day long.
Yeah.
So maybe Milos, I would put Milos in that next tier of athletes, but I would have Neil over Milos.
Why would you put Neil over Milos, in your opinion?
Results. So at the end of the day, again, we're talking about coaching, and we, at the end of the day, success is number one. Impact, I guess, would be either second or third, but it's competition. A coach's record and an athlete's record is the be all end all, and then other things are into an equation. And Neil has had a lot of success.
I mean, I think, don't get me wrong, fantastic coach, but you give him Flex Lewis and you give him William Bomack, and then you've got John De La Rosa currently, and you've got that classic physique, Cambronero.
Steve Glorious too.
Cabanero. Yeah.
Steve Glorious. And so, I mean, you've got, I think, Milos in the 2000s. Milos is a guy who, when he was competing still, he was still working with these guys, and he brought in, he's a guy who had a lot of impact on Dennis. And then again, impact is hard to quantify, right? Which is why titles is a little bit easier.
Right.
Dennis James is somebody I learned a lot from him. Dennis Wolf is somebody who he brought in. Hidetada is a guy who was an undersized Olympia guy who still made it in the top 10 a couple times, I believe, in an era of just mass monsters. Gustavo Bedell. What was that?
Chris Dim, yeah.
Yep, Chris Dim as well.
He was a serious contender for a number of years before he got injured or whatever it was.
Yep, his issue. Gustavo Bedell, he took him from like nothing to place in top 3, I believe, in the Olympia. And then Nasser. How do we get Nasser, right?
I thought Gustavo ended up with like a 6'7" guy. I don't remember the year he was third.
I think he placed high one year.
Did he?
It was either an Arnold or an Olympia. He was like 3 or 4, and everyone was like, "Whoa!" And then he got the Muscle Tech contract, and yeah.
And then Nasser, I think the year he blew up, that was what, 94, 95, right? and that was after he and I think Milos helped him with that. So, but like you're saying, I mean, if you're valuing those, if you're valuing 212 Olympias and Olympia second places, for sure, Neil Hill is above Milos. But at the same time, you know, I think Milos has had more of an impact on the sport than Neil Hill has.
I put those two in that same tier, in that same category. Yeah. I personally would list Neil above Milos, but we have the Mount Rushmore. I think that group is that next group right under there. So at that point, we're almost splitting hairs, which is what this is all about. What's the opinion on who's better? We still haven't settled on a number 4. Do we think either of those guys is in the same conversation though as
the other 3?
Who we're looking at now for the last spot? I would say no. Not yet.
No.
Not yet. Okay.
Maybe we should start a poll up on the bodybuilding page, and we'll put some of these names up, and we'll see what the group says for who's that
for the last spot.
I'm gonna say number 4. Yeah.
Last spot.
Does that make sense?
You have it.
Yeah.
There's one open space on the Mount Rushmore of bodybuilding.
That was a good one, Drew. That was a great one, definitely.
There you go. All right, George. So let's shift gears here.
Moving on to who are the top coaches currently, as of like right now. Not just body of work. What do we want to do? The last 2 years, last 3 years? How do you want to?
I would say current active coaches. Okay. So like I said, I would take, you can't have 1 or 2 athletes and be considered a current active coach. So again, I would say Hany would be excused out of this conversation because he's working with one guy. So we're not going to include cherry picking. We're going to talk about current active coaches who have a resume and have a list of clients that are currently competing, regardless of division, because that's the other difference is we are in an era where now there are multiple divisions, and you have to talk about people that impact every division. Perfect example is I wouldn't put a Kim Odo on the Mount Rushmore all time of bodybuilders, but I put Kim Odo is the greatest bikini coach of all time, and whether somebody likes the division or not, it's part of our sport. It would be, I would equate it to if we're talking about football coaches and you're the defensive back coach and you're the running back coach and another guy's a linebacker coach, is that, well, he doesn't matter. They have the least impact on the game. I said, well, I understand. It's still competitive. They're still professional athletes. They're still competing at a high level against thousands and thousands of others. You still have to reward who's the best at what they do. So when it comes to that, I think we would look at it overall coaches and then sometimes break it down into some specific divisions, because there are now coaches that are specialty coaches, so to speak. So Andrew, why don't you kick us off on kind of give us a list of some guys or girls that you think are at the top of the game today?
So I'm going to start off, I guess, with like a specialty coach in a sense. I don't think anyone does more with the women's muscle divisions than Shelby Starnes. I mean, every day you go on Instagram, you see a new girl who's just shredded out of her mind, and she's 15 weeks out from whatever pro show or just won her pro card or national qualifier. Between women's physique and women's figure, I don't think, and women's bodybuilding, I don't think there's another coach out there that understands how to get the most out of women, in terms of numbers, What do you guys think about that?
I would agree with you for women's physique and women's bodybuilding. I don't really know the list of women's physique and women's bodybuilders is unbelievable. I'm not sure if I can think of very many top figure pros that are with Shelby over the last 2 years.
Well, I guess, switching gears here, I guess I was kind of thinking in terms of just impact of numbers in the NPC and IFBB. And maybe not just, Olympia wins, or Arnold Classic wins, but just W's in general across NPC, IFBB, turning people pro, turning women pro specifically, and seemingly nailing their condition every single time. Yeah. That's just where I was going with that.
Gotcha. I think Shelby does an unbelievable job when it comes to that. I'll counter a name who's great with, I would say the best current coach for any female division is Damian Kosovo out in Arizona. He's got Olympia titles in bikini, figure, and fitness. So if you're talking about overall females, I think currently he's just at the top of the game.
What's his like coaching name? I've never heard of him. Can you fill me in a little bit?
Zeke. So it's maybe we know him this way better. Whitney Jones's better half, Damian.
Okay.
Yeah, he's a low-key guy. He doesn't like to be in the limelight. He doesn't like to do much interviewing. He's not about that, but he's about results.
So
is the criteria still like top pro victories, turning people pro?
Yeah, I think I think it's the same criteria overall. Okay. Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay.
If we're talking turning people pro in the women's divisions, I don't think you can forget Shane Hughley at all.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That guy.
That was my next name.
That was my vote.
Yeah.
Every show, man, every national show, I'll go on Instagram and I'll be scrolling for probably at least 45 seconds to get through Shane Hughley posts about his top 3, top 2, first place pro card winning athletes, man. It's nuts. Across all the divisions, across bikini, figure, mostly bikini and figure. I've seen a little bit of physique. And then the other thing about his range is he's not just a women's coach, If you see some of the guys that he has, he doesn't seem to get a lot of men just because I think he's known more of as a women's coach. But the men that he gets, they're on point, man. I think he got Russ Allen, his card.
Yes.
I've seen a number of different
Shane
national
Stewart.
guys.
Shane Stewart won USA's in 2018 overall. And he was a Masters guy too. So
I was just going to ask that, Andrew. I wasn't he was 40?
He was like 41 or 39 or something. He had the opportunity to go do the Universe. He had the opportunity to go do Masters Nationals. He skipped those and said, "No, I want to go to the Open." And he went in and just smoked the USA's. When what year was that? Was that 20?
2 years ago.
You did it, right?
2018.
It was 2018.
2018.
Yeah.
Lunsford was 17.
Yeah.
Was it 2017?
Is Shane
No,
Hughley,
Lunsford was 17.
Yeah. That's right.
Is Hughley maybe the best at that level currently?
I think so.
When you talk about the NPC and the national level, now he's a perfect example of there's a few people like this. I think we might be able to say he's the best currently when it comes to amateurs. However, that success does not transition into the IFBB whatsoever for him. Not currently. For the amount of pro cards that he pumps out, his amount of pro success is minuscule. And so there's still some things we need to see get worked out there. Is that similar to then we've seen other coaches in football and basketball who are phenomenal on the NCAA level. Mm-hmm. When they went to the professional ranks, their styles did not work. They had to go back to the college ranks. Is it, he's still young and he's still got a lot of time to learn and grow, but is that what we're looking at currently?
Quite possibly, yeah. Yeah, quite possibly. Kind of like Nick Saban in a sense. He won a couple national championships, goes to the Dolphins, doesn't have a great 2 years there, goes to Alabama, starts winning 4 more national titles. I mean, yeah, it is kind of a good analogy.
Rick Pitino. I mean, there's a lot of coaches that we've seen historically do that, and it for whatever reason, we're not speculating on why, but for whatever reason, it's not translating. Is Ryan Hinton another guy that we could look at and say, currently lots of success, a lot more NPC, so he pumps out pro cards like crazy, but you have seen now Ryan Hinton in the last George, correct me if I'm wrong, the last maybe 15, 16, 18 months, you're starting to see Ryan Hinton have more success on the IFBB level now.
Yeah.
Is that a product of the last few years of a lot of NPC pro card success, and some of those athletes that have stayed with him now are starting to see IFBB success? Because up until a year ago or so, we were saying similar things about Ryan Hinton that we were of Shane Hughley. A lot of pro cards, not a lot of pro success.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with that. To go along with the analogy of the coaches, it's kind of the same thing. Some coaches can't, and some coaches can make that transition, slowly into the pro ranks. It's about how they evolve as a coach. How their coaching styles match pros. And their mindset, because it has to be a connection. You'll talk about Aceto, and maybe all of those check-ins build that bond, and I know that, he runs a team-oriented, atmosphere with legacy. So, I think he's going to continue to get better, and, that's just the path that he may be on, but it doesn't always work out like that.
What do we attribute this to, though? Let's use Team Hughley as an example. Why are we seeing so much NPC success and not nearly the IFBB success that he had on the NPC level?
I think too many athletes, honestly. You know what I mean? I think it's just a little bit, I don't know, maybe I'm wrong here, but this is just sort of my opinion looking from the outside in, is just he has so many athletes that it's hard to sort of keep that pattern going. You know what I mean? And obviously it's a different level. It's much more competitive. But I mean, some of the guys that are more successful at the pro level, at least that I've seen, it seems like they might have smaller numbers, and the guys that are really successful at the amateur level have huge numbers as far as athletes go. But I could be wrong.
To kind of jump in on that, I'll say a guy I think who has a lot of success at the amateur level, and I think in the last 2 years at the pro level, Sid's coach, Andrew Boo. I mean, we've seen him have, top 5 Olympians. We've seen him have national champions at multiple shows. Yeah, I think he's definitely an up-and-comer, again, from the Chris Aceto coaching tree. But, Sid can talk about his relationship and how he does things. But he's obviously pumping out numbers in the NPC, and then he's now following and seeing that success in the IFBB, in all divisions too. So.
Yeah, like Andrew said, Andrew Vu, his range as a coach, across all the divisions. I think last year he had the junior nationals and USA's classic overall winner. He had Jessica Padilla, who was a top 3 figure Olympia. And then I don't know if she won the Arnold or if she was top 3 at the Arnold that year. And then he had John Jewett, who top 5 at the Olympia in the 212. He had Natalia, I can't say her last name, Brazilian.
Coelho, I think.
Coelho, is that it?
I think so.
Two Portuguese for me. But yeah, she was granted she was great before him, but she certainly didn't get work. And you could argue that she came in more with the women's physique look that they're looking for now, working with Andrew, and she plays very well. So he's just somebody. He got Cade Zook. He was working with Cade Zook when Cade got his pro card after a couple of years of trying for it and not being successful, And so he's had success with bodybuilders, success with classic physique guys. And I know Hunter Labrada has done nothing just yet.
Yeah, I was just going to say, how can you forget Hunter?
Yeah, how can you forget Hunter, right? But I mean, that's how good Andrew is, right? That he's got enough on his resume that you don't have to talk about his one stud up and comer, So yeah, but once Hunter hits the scene as a pro, I think you're going to see him starting to make an impact as well.
Isn't Andrew like 29, 30? He's young.
Andrew, I think, is 32.
32. We're still young.
Yeah.
Honestly, I was going to say him too. I think he's like, say we do this 10 years down the road and we do the Mount Rushmore, I could see Andrew Vu on there, honestly. Just he seems very consistent. At least his last 2 years, it's like crazy how he peaks people, and his consistency has been like mind-blowing to me, honestly. That's the one thing I've noticed.
Didn't he have like every class at junior nationals last year? Like
Yeah,
from
the Ray
middleweights,
too.
light heavy, heavy, supers. He had like all 4 guys, and I think a couple. He had the classic winner, and I think he had another guy in the classic overall also. So yeah, I mean, he's having his guys battle it out in overall. You can't be upset at that.
You notice every couple of years there seems to be cycles of athletes, divisions, and coaches that go through, and a coach gets hot, they get popular, a lot of people go to them, and then you get to really see what that coach is able to do. Sid, like you said, their range. Nate, like you said, their ability to peak people over and over and over. And I think that's really what happened to Andrew. Just was it 2 years ago or so, maybe 3? Andrew, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but and once he got the opportunity, boy, he hasn't given that ball up, man. Not only is he doing a bang up job, it's interesting. When you see guys who are kind of low key like that, but he's always there. Andrew's a guy where I'm walking down a hall or I'm heading up to the press pit to do something, and he like sneaks up behind. He's like, "Hey, how's it going?" I'm like, "Oh, what's up, buddy?" Always wants to say hello. The guy, always right there in the mix.
He's always there.
His eye on everything.
He's the guy as a competitor. I always hope his athletes aren't at my show, honestly. I'm like, I hope Andrew doesn't have someone in my class.
Yeah, I've got Andrew at in the top. I don't know if we were to say the top 10 of current coaches today, without a doubt. He's really doing a bang up job. I'll throw out the name of the first female coach that I think is very impactful, and it's the better half of Damian. It's Whitney Jones. And so people sometimes think that they're one and the same, and they're not. Whitney, I think, is interesting because she's the current Miss Olympia when it comes to fitness. People don't understand how much coaching she actually does as well. So I think the two of them are kind of, they're separate but together. And if you see her energy, her attitude, her personality, and the way she goes about handling her business is what rubs off on all those other athletes. Because if you go out there, when we were visiting them, you saw a camp of female athletes. It was one successful woman after another, like her and Sid Gillen, and it was extraordinary to see. There's something to be said about that mindset that seems to transpire through all of those athletes there, which is why when we were talking earlier about the Chris Aceto, I'm a big believer in coaching is not just X's and O's. It's not just supplements. It's not just gear protocols. It's not only peaking that particular day, because how many athletes do we all know could have been, should have been, or supposed to be, and never were? Somebody had to mentally be able to get them to the point to be able to succeed. And I think a lot of times that is vastly underrated. I mean, can we not think of dozens of genetic freaks in every division that we all thought were going to be God's gift to everything in this sport and are gone?
Yeah.
Speaking of that topic, I don't know how you guys feel about AJ Sims, but AJ Sims is a guy who he gets a lot of flack, but looking at the guys he's taken from other coaches and seeing how he's changed them, if you look at like Sadiq Hadzovic, who was working with Chris Aceto, came in off, gets with AJ Sims, actually comes in shape. Justin Rodriguez came in off for years, came in fat, honestly, not off, came in fat, gets with AJ Sims, he's in shape. Joel Thomas can't get in shape, gets with AJ Sims. And I don't know if that's a mental thing, whether he's just able to like connect with his athletes and make them actually adhere. But there's something there when you see a guy who's working with athletes who couldn't bring it previously, then he gets them and they're on point.
Yeah, he was actually at the top of my list because when Mandus was saying amateurs and pros, he has tons of amateurs too. I know Casey Castro, who won the heavyweights or got second place at heavyweights nationals, and then you had like Austin Conley, and then a middleweight Justin Yurko, who
He
won his
moved up
pro
a class.
card, and then and that transformation
Casey
was
moved up
crazy.
a class.
It was only
in how many months?
light heavyweight.
How many
Light heavyweight at USA's and then heavyweight at
Yeah.
nationals for placing second.
And then even like Logan Franklin, Chase Savoy, he has like men's physique guys, classic guys. So sort of all across the board, you know what I mean? And his conditioning is usually pretty immaculate.
I think it's absolutely in that top 10 current list. I think the flack there, though, Sid, like you're saying, is, you know, whatever people want to talk about. The one thing that does seem to happen maybe a little more often with some of his guys, and it could be a coincidence, is they don't compete a lot. Or they compete, they look fantastic, and then you don't see them for a year and a half. There's, you know, that throws me for a loop slightly, but I mean, I'm a big fan. I think he's a top 10 current guy all day long. I would like to see some of his guys get on stage a little more. That's all.
Didn't he have Juan? Didn't he have Juan too?
Yeah, Juan Morel too.
Yeah. Just the current one. Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
I
Where
want to
did
talk about
Alexi
that.
Rivera go? You know, he looks great, and now he's been gone. Chase Savoy hasn't competed. You know, so there's something. Is that a mental thing? We already said maybe.
Because Logan competed and Logan looking better. You looking better for this second run around. You know, so some of it might be, you know, mental, and you know, some of it might be the obvious. You know,
so is he getting them to get on stage and give their all more than they've ever done in the past? And it's so much for them. They need to shut down now for 12. I don't know.
I think we've all seen the protocols online of what we're kind of talking about here, and I think a lot of us kind of get scared or grab our kidneys and whatnot when we see it. So I'll just leave that there. One thing I will say though, also, and I do think he's excellent at bringing people in. I think the Instagram thing, the pictures don't always give you the true, you know what I mean, the true meaning or the true view of what they're going to look like on stage. Because we see that picture of Juan looking like an alien at 2 weeks out with veins and striation cuts everywhere. Then we see him on the stage and we're like, okay, like he's in shape, but you know what I mean? And I think we kind of see that a lot with some of his guys with, you know, they look good. They're brought in shape and everything, but their Instagram pictures make you think, man, this guy's the top Olympian. And then you see him on stage and, you know, they blend a little bit, you know?
Yeah, we haven't seen the elite level in the IFBB out of him yet. You know, we haven't seen very many top.
I think Alexis is like he brought him
Farah,
in,
right?
nailed it,
Fantastic.
absolutely nailed it.
Right at that Tampa, and then where has he been since?
Yeah,
I mean, Alexis, you can't really put on AJ that much, right? Just because Alexis had a knee injury, and then he went through the like a hurricane issue, I believe, and so I don't know if that's all AJ's fault, but definitely the other guys, you know, you can't say that for all of them. So there's a pattern there with AJ and his methods, it seems like.
But I mean, I got him on a list. I think, man, does he bring people in? If you're looking to come in shape, what's his saying? Fat free. Yeah, fat free. He's gonna get you there.
Well, Mandus, you were there at Tampa with me last year when Joel Thomas competed. We'd never seen him look like that before.
I agree.
I mean, he was lights out, peeled. Backstage, he was peeled. On stage, he was peeled. Like, we hadn't seen him inside out like that before. So
you saw Chase Savoy the year before, George. I mean, this guy could have got – he was peeled for 12, 13, 14 weeks.
Yeah.
At one point, I called him just to ask him, is there something else you're getting ready for? Is there a show in January or February, that I don't know of, as he was getting ready for the Arnold? And it ended up being a little too much for too long for him, unfortunately. But the guy definitely gets people in shape. There's no doubt. I think the only question is, you know, are not enough of those guys not competing enough? Perhaps, and it could be on them. Again, we're not putting it on him, but we do see a little bit of a pattern there. So it's something to talk about. Justin, give us a guy you got in your back pocket.
No, mine was Andrew Vu.
Yeah, yeah, we're all on board with you at Andrew.
I was waiting to say that since yesterday, but
yeah.
Jake, I think you brought up. I mean, if we're talking about women's divisions here, I think Kimoto. I think it was the last year's Arnold Classic. I think he had 5 out of the top 6 bikini competitors, and I was just, whoa, that's impressive.
What's really impressive is there have been multiple years where he's had 3 out of 5, 4 out of 5 of the top Olympians in bikini. But not only that, when you talk to people that are around him, Damien, Ryan Benton, Team Zero Gravity, myself, all of those people, and I mean, there's a slew of others. It's off the top of my head. He has impacted every one of those other coaches in a positive way, some more than others. I don't personally have a lot of knowledge from him, a little bit, but I know Ryan at Zero Gravity. I know Damien and Whitney out there in Arizona. From my understanding, even Hany early on, there was a lot that Hany used to pick his brain about. Because what a lot of people don't remember is Kim actually used to have almost all the figure pros for a while. When figure was first coming out, he actually started with men, though. He was Kim Oto's been around since the 80s. He used to coach the men. Then he went to figure and was dominating figure. And then when bikini came out, he slid on over to the bikini. So he's been doing this even longer than Aceto. He started back in the 1980s.
Mm-hmm.
So when you talk about not only current success on stage, but longevity success and then overall impact, Kimoto might be in that conversation of Mount Rushmore.
Mm-hmm.
Even though some people say, well, he was coaching the women. It's not just bikini. Look at the longevity of his success. And he's in that conversation, I believe, with Neil Hill and George Farah. Not saying he makes that Mount Rushmore, but I think he's in the conversation from his body of work.
Can't disagree
So
with
George Farah and Neil, where do you guys put them as current coaches? Because they're still pretty active.
Near the top. I mean, if they're on a Mount Rushmore, how could they not be at the top? For me,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
For me. Now, I don't know if I would say Neil is still at the same level. I would say George is maybe slipped back a little. Not for any other reason than, obviously with all the things he went through and he's doing a lot less traveling. He's paying a lot more attention to just his everyday life and health in general. So I believe his overall focus is not anywhere near what it used to be like it was in his heyday. So I put him on that list. I just don't put him nearly as high because I don't think he's giving all the time and attention, which, I mean, I don't think any of us would either, with all the things he's been.
Yeah. Well, I think a lot of us, like we're in that age group where, bodybuilding, competing, all coaching, it's our thing right now, right?
Right.
I think as we get older and we diversify our businesses and maybe get involved in real estate or get involved in whatever, it just becomes a little less chunk of our attention, and it kind of, what you think is important right now might not be as important later on. He's probably just that stage of life where, he's moved on a little bit. He still keeps his good guys, but,
Yeah, absolutely. How about Panini?
Who?
The Brazilian coach.
Oh yeah.
Oh, yeah. I tell you what, you have to look over there and say, oh boy, this guy knows what he's doing. We haven't been able to see a ton of it on our stages, but if you look over there and then you see what he's bringing, from what I hear, he has limited. He's got so many talented females that when there's shows that there's certain qualifications for, he'll only bring 1 or 2 for each division because he doesn't want them battling and knocking each other off. There's a strategic plan. You know you're doing something right when you got that many horses in a stable.
Do you think we're
Not
going to see
really,
more and more
I
of
don't
him
know
over
much
here?
about him.
Oh,
Mandus, do you think we're going to see more of him over here with the advent of like wellness?
Tons
and,
more. Tons more. Yeah, he's about to be. I'd say within 2 years he'll become a household name. He'll become a household name. Yeah.
I'm not really sure I know much about this guy, but he seems to be the hot item right now. But Patrick Tor, he works with Nichols Vlad, works with Aaron Pilates. I know James Hollings had just went to him. I know Josh Nardos was with him for a little bit.
Ian now too, right?
Ian,
yeah. And then like Daniel Tooth, who's always like shredded, and then that new guy Florian Peterson, who's ridiculous. Me and Sid were talking about the other day. I don't know much about him, but he seems to be drawing in a lot of these newer, up and coming
like
pros,
especially outside of the U.S.
Yeah,
big out in Europe. And he, I did a little bit of research before the show just to make sure that I didn't say any wrong information. And something that interesting I found out was Patrick Tor is in that Milos Sarcev coaching tree. So just another instance of that. You can really trace this stuff back, years and years. Everybody learned from something.
I think that Team Stones guy is from Milos too, isn't he? Or he came up with Milos. Team Stones?
Yes.
The Yamamoto guy.
Yeah, I think you're right,
I
actually.
think he came up with Milos.
Oh, no,
too.
yeah, you are right. You're right. There's a lot of pictures of them together on Instagram.
What about Dorian Hamilton up north of the border?
Can't deny
He's
that.
hot right now.
No. Another one that me and Nate were talking about yesterday. I don't know if a lot of you guys know him, but he's had guys top 5 at the Olympia. Francisco Jose Espin.
Yeah. Who got that Angel Calderon guy?
Yeah. But if you look at his roster, he's got a lot of guys that I think we're going to see make an impact this year in the 212 specifically.
That classic guy. You know that classic guy. What's his name? Modalin or something.
Yeah.
Ridiculous.
Yeah.
He won that European show. But
Yeah.
he looks crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of his guys, you go down his roster and they're all like shredded, peeled.
They all come in peeled and dialed in.
Let's talk for a second on perception of coaching in a modern era. So this panel is vastly made up of bodybuilders. Is your guys' general perception a coach has to be considered a good coach because they only coach bodybuilders?
It depends on your metric, I think. I mean, like, obviously our interest is bodybuilding first, right? So we want to see the good bodybuilders, the good classic guys, the muscle divisions more than anything. Sorry, George, you got muscles, but we want to see,
Are you a fan? So you're a fan. What I'm understanding then is you're a fan of bodybuilding, but not the overall sport of bodybuilding?
I wouldn't necessarily say that. I would just say I think a lot of us, our first love is bodybuilding. When we opened the first magazine, it was the bodybuilders we looked at. Okay. You know what I mean? That's what we wanted to aspire to. That's what we wanted to look like. So I think that's always our first love. But then when you look at all the individual divisions, I think we're definitely gaining an appreciation and love for the individual looks. And we have favorite athletes and coaches within those divisions.
Well, I think too, it's like selling a product too, right? So if someone has a bodybuilder that you're really intrigued with and you're really a big fan of, that's going to draw you to that coach, right? It's almost like selling a product. You know what I mean? So if someone's worked with Jay Cutler, so then it intrigued me to work with him.
So then my question is then the follow-up is, are you then considering a coach a better coach if he's an average coach or slightly above average for bodybuilders compared to an elite level coach of bikini and figure per se?
Well, to me, I think there's a greater level of difficulty in bringing in a bodybuilder on point compared to like a bikini girl. And that's
Absolutely.
just, I mean, I'm not a coach, but it's just body fat levels, the look that they're going for. It's very different, and I think the greater skill isn't the coaches that are skilled in bodybuilding and classic, right?
But again, but a coach, regardless of the division of the sport, they still have to be highly successful in their genre. So although it's harder to coach an open bodybuilder, that's what I'm asking. So are you regarding an average or slightly above average coach who coaches bodybuilders an overall better coach than, say, a Damien or a Kimoto who coach female divisions, but are at the top of what they do, the best of the best?
Personally, I don't feel that way. I feel there's pillars in the different women's divisions of coaching, and I think their body of work, it speaks for itself. And they're definitely above your average level coach.
I'll disagree a little bit. I think I'll tell you what. I think a top coach is a person that can bring in athletes of all different sports, whether it's bikini, figure, bodybuilding, whatever the division is. You know what I mean? I think if someone has a body of work of consistently bringing those athletes in at their peak, to me, that's the ultimate, deciding factor. I mean, not everyone's going to be able to coach Ronnie Coleman or Phil Heath, or the top bikini athlete or whatever. But I think if there's someone like, in my mind, I'm thinking Andrew Vu right now, because we've seen him bring in, multi-divisional success at, NPC and IFBB level now. So, yeah.
Nate?
Well, I guess, I don't know. I took that question as almost like, what would I look for in like hiring a coach, maybe?
No, not
sort of like a little bit, or
not what you would hire. But if you're having a conversation and you're talking about who are some of the best coaches, are you considering a coach an average or slightly above average coach who coaches predominantly bodybuilders, an overall better coach than someone who coaches the female divisions but are at the top of their game? But because it's the female divisions, it is easier. So are they not as good of a coach? Are you not regarding them in that same conversation?
I don't know. For me, that's hard to answer. I mean, because, I guess if I look at like the powerhouse of female competitors, I look at like, Shane, Johnny Castellina, I don't know,
Shelby,
some of those guys, Shelby. I mean, they can bring in bodybuilders too. They just don't have as big of a stable, I guess. So usually I find like if the coaches are pretty well versed in the female athletes, they're usually pretty good with bodybuilders too. They just don't have as many of those athletes, I guess. So I mean, usually there's like one or two bodybuilders like in their sort of stable, and they usually look pretty good. So I don't know. It's a hard question to answer, I guess, for me.
Justin?
So to me, I'm going to go off of Andrew's point with the consistency over all classes. So we could like use an example like would I take an Andrew Vu over a Patrick Tour? Because we don't see any success in Patrick Tour, in like the figure divisions, women's physique division, stuff like that. So to me, that would be Andrew. Not to take anything away from Patrick, it's just there's more consistency. It's like the first conversation we had. Wins rule everything, and the statistics rule everything in this determination. So are we going to go with someone who has wins in all classes, all realms, or just one area? And to me, I'm going to be with Andrew and say we have to look at all areas to determine who's the better coach.
Patrick Tour, unfortunately, I guess you guys don't know enough about Damien, but Damien Kosovo. Damien, I'm sorry, I'm probably butchering your last name, but there's a perfect example. Damien has no male clients.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't want to have anything to do with male clients. But I believe he currently has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Is it 7 Olympia titles over 3 different female divisions? I want to say it's even more. Might be 8 Arnold Classic titles, 7 Olympia titles, 3 different female divisions, no male competitors at all. But that's what. So now his body of work compared to who you guys were just talking about, who predominantly does bodybuilders?
A hard one to
overall
answer.
Sport, I got to go with, if it's the overall sport, then you got to go with the guy with the wins. You know what I mean? So I would say, I mean, I'm taking out that I'm like mainly a bodybuilder and a bodybuilder fan, and saying, looking at the overall sport,
Right.
and yeah, the guy with the wins is going to definitely be the better coach.
Because again, coaching is about your results, right? Not your results in only one particular division. Isn't it about whatever division you happen to dabble in? It's about your overall success. It would, you know, so that's the question I had. So, okay. All right. Who are we missing? We got anybody else that we don't have on this list currently?
I mean, you got to mention Omar for men's physique.
Absolutely.
I mean, he's got Ray and Andre. You guys, Kayaki. What else does he have?
I want to say he had 3 of the top 7 at the Olympia this year. That's,
yeah, I mean, you can't
doesn't
deny
matter
that.
what
Like you
division
said,
it is. That's impressive. That is extremely impressive.
I'm trying to think who's like a guy like that in women's. I don't really know many women's figure coaches, like, except for here and there randomly. Is there anyone that like has a?
That's
okay. I'll have to do some research on that.
Yeah,
guy.
he really is. And again, I think you guys know. I'm not ever in a hurry to go out there and really toot somebody's horn. I give credit where credit's due, and I'll ask a question where I think it needs to be asked. It's again my opinion. Respect Kimoto like no other. I think currently Damian is the best coach when it comes to overall female divisions. Damian has set himself apart from everybody else because of year after year, Arnold Olympia, division after division after division, title after title after title, multiple athletes. But again, I would put Kim's overall body of work ahead of him, obviously. But currently, I would say Damian when it comes to the females. And because of that, I would put him as one of the top coaches today. Because, again, I separate, and this is just my opinion. I have the ability to separate. I look at the sport as a whole. So, of course, there's not even a debate or a conversation who's at the top of the food chain, what's harder to accomplish, what's harder to work with. Bodybuilders, hands down, no conversation. However, we're talking about overall competition still. And if somebody is that dominating, I have to give them credit for their accomplishments. And those accomplishments are extreme success consistently over and over and over, year after year after year. That's what I recognize.
I'll actually piggyback onto your point, Mandus. I actually don't think male bodybuilders are the hardest to peak or get ready for a show. Anyone that works with, women's physique or women's figure, I think, because we have a whole different set of hormonal issues to work with, especially when you're adding compounds and stuff. And to get a woman leaner, we know it is a little bit harder. So I would agree with you then there. With if he's able to bring all these women in consistently, Olympias, Arnold, that kind of thing, then yeah, using that criteria and knowing that, I mean, you work with women, Justin, you work with women, like it's, sometimes it's hard, you have to have a whole different skill set or a whole different base of knowledge when it comes to hormones and different things that just, don't necessarily translate to guys. So yeah, I agree with you.
Okay, what's your guys' opinions on what all would fit a coaching criteria? Do you think it's how much of it is about knowledge of supplements compared to their eye, compared to their peaking them properly the last, if we want to call it, 24, 48 hours, depending on what show you're doing, right? Compared to mentally how that coach is able to bring those athletes along?
I mean, I think those are the components that make it a good coach. So I mean, obviously, if you know, the more of those that you have, the better coach you will be. You know, so I think definitely all of those have to be in there because all of them are very important. So you got to get in and get out. Got to get in and get out.
Yeah, I mean, because in a prep, there's two main things with coaching, right? A, getting the athlete in shape, and B, peaking them for that event, right? So I think, you know, a great coach is someone that can A, get them to where they need to be 3-4 days out, maybe early, hopefully, and then peak them properly running into their event so they do look their best. So, you know.
And that all ties into the eye of knowing what they need to look like to win.
Yeah.
How much do we think the mental factor really plays into this? Not much or a whole lot?
A lot.
Depends on the athlete.
I think it plays in. Yeah, I mean, yeah, definitely. But I think it plays in a lot because as a coach, you have to know who you're dealing with. You know, you got to know where that person is mentally. Some people you leave alone. Some people you got to, you know, hold their hand a little bit more. You know, so once again,
look at
to coaching.
Look at guys like Cedric. He openly admits, you know what I mean? He's a wreck, you know what I mean? And can never really nail his peak, you know? I'm not saying like he doesn't die at 100% either, but, you know, like there's plenty of guys that are, you know, sort of a mental case, can never really, you know, nail it because they get in their head too much. They might do something to fuck it up, you know what I mean? Or I don't know. So it is a lot of mental, you know what I mean? Me and Andrew have had plenty of experience with myself and, you know, just like peaking and I've had shows where I was sort of not really dialed in mentally, and then some shows where I'm very confident and I always do well. Anytime I've been very confident, I've always peaked well. It was smooth. I digested the food. Everything was sort of on point. So, yeah.
Kind of piggybacking also from an earlier point about Chad Nichols, knowing that some of his guys were going to be cheating on the diet a little bit. It's all about knowing your athletes, you know? Like, if I know Nate doesn't eat one thing that's not on his plan, and I just know that's the kind of person he is, well, I can treat this a certain way. But if I know so-and-so, I see on their Instagram story, they're sitting there next to a plate of fries or whatever it is, you know, I'll screenshot it and I'll send it to them and tell them, do it again, you're out. But that's another story. But you know what I mean? Just knowing your athletes.
Do you guys think that the mental aspect of coaching is undervalued and underappreciated and really under discussed as a tool that a coach needs? Not every athlete needs that, but I mean, we know, unfortunately, I would say the majority of athletes, 51% is majority, right? I'm not saying 80%, but the majority of athletes are absolute head cases. And I'll give you a division that is the biggest head case of all. Bodybuilding. Bodybuilders are far more insecure and are much more of a head case than the men's physique division. I'm going to leave that there, and then let's it's just we can say we want. They are far more confident in what they are supposed to be doing and then going out there to perform mentally than the average bodybuilder. But I don't want that to be the only conversation. Do we think that the mental approach and preparation that coaches need to have to get their athletes ready to be on stage and do well, is that very undervalued or not talked about enough, or is it not that big of a deal and not something we really need to discuss very often?
Well, I think it's definitely very undervalued, and clearly, I mean, you know, if you got, I think that was the Michael Jordan thing on right now, and you listen to how Phil deals with Michael, then how Phil deals with Dennis Rodman. It's the same thing, you know. You got to deal with people different, you know. Mandus,
Good analogy.
You deal with me different than you deal with Brandon. You know, we've had these discussions.
Completely different.
Yes, it's
two
the coach.
Completely different relationships.
Yeah, but
absolutely.
Every coach that I've worked with that I've had success with, we've had our own thing mentally, and it's an understanding. And once we both understand, then it's just executing the plan. That's it. So I think it's the most important thing. You got to have something mentally, because why should I listen to you? That's my thing. You gotta have something to make me listen to you. So, you know, once we establish what makes us go, then it's just like I said, you know, putting in the work.
Justin?
No, I'm on board with that. I think the mental aspect is, you've got to mesh. If, you have a client that is, or a competitor that's a head case and coach doesn't want to deal with it or doesn't know how to deal with it, then it's just not going to vibe, and that's going to translate to the work. It's that simple. You can have all the knowledge you want. You can have all the wins you want, but when it comes to breaking down each competitor, if you don't know how to vibe with them and talk to them and keep them calm, which is, in my opinion, one of the biggest aspects to peaking for a show is staying calm, low stress levels. If you're not on the same page, then there's nothing. And it's just that they're gonna go on to another coach.
I think it's getting them to buy into what your coaching style is or whatever you're saying. Because you got people that are great athletes and they can do their own thing. We're talking about guys, they do their own thing. So in order for me to listen to you and do what you say instead of what I think, then I think that's something that you have to deliver to me to get to me mentally before I start to just give you the keys and just drop, just put the work in. I think it's important, man. That's just my opinion.
And that's why I think we see a lot of success with coaches that have had competitors for a while.
Right.
Not just their 12 to 14 week contest prep.
Right.
Because someone who's established a relationship over 12 weeks compared to someone who has over 2 or 3 years, things are going to go a lot more smooth.
I think the mental aspect of coaching is one of the least talked about and one of the most undervalued parts of coaching that there is in bodybuilding. If you look at every other sport, you see what a major impact it has. Let's go again and back to the conversation of most of the top 10, top 15 Olympians and Arnold Classic athletes. They're phenomenal athletes, right? They have great genetics. They're going to work their asses off. Who mentally can get them to, like George says, A, buy in, but then B, with the consistency and continuity, you then have two people on the same page that are understanding how things are happening and firing with that physique consistently over a period of time. There's a lot more knowledge that the two of them are able to look at. There's a lot more data that they're able to look at. And then, Justin, you say about the eye all the time. So then when you're seeing something, you're able to make those changes more easily. But even more importantly, the athlete then truly believes and bought into that coach and what they see and what they feel and what they think. And therefore, the cortisol levels are way down. The stress levels are way down. They're openly able to say, that's what you see. That's what you want me to do. This is what I'm going to do. There's less, the cortisol levels are down. There's like gut issues because they're not so nervous. There's not all those butterflies and things going on. The water protocols seem to work a lot better. We both know some athletes who are such head cases that they have all kinds of problems with water protocols, not because the water protocol didn't work, but because their anxiety is going through the roof. All of those things play into the factor of the mentality of that coach and what their communication and relationship is. And when you see that consistency and continuity over time, you tend to see those people are not only more successful, they tend to miss a lot less. Look at most of the people who have won an Arnold or Olympia in the last, let's just use 5 years or so. Okay. And think about each one of those divisions. I think it's an overwhelming majority of those people have all been with their coaches for 5+ years. I want to say it's an over 75% mark that every winner of the last 5 Olympias or Arnold's Olympias in every division has had a long time with their coaches. That's a consistency and continuity.
I think a true test to see what kind of relationships these people have, at the top level is, if a competitor stays with a coach even when they don't win.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You see guys that stay with coaches, for 3, 4, 5 years, even through the losses. That's when there's a relationship and there's a connection to where, that's when that's when success happens. Not just winning all the time.
I thought it was very interesting when I just said what I said about 75% or higher clip. If you guys were all looking at the screen, you should have seen all of your faces. It was like, whoa. And we had part of this conversation. George and I did something like this similar on another show. But go ahead and name the last couple of Olympia champions in each division and think of their coach and then look at the lineage that they've had together.
Well, who's Brandon Curry's coach?
Abdullah.
Yeah.
But how long has he been with him for a while? I know he moved out there, and it's been 4
at least 5 years, 6 years, maybe.
Okay, cool,
yeah.
Nice.
Since like 2016, after 2016, when he was like DNP at Olympia, I think he got with Abdullah after that.
Okay. Maybe that's why Rami hasn't, been the guy. How many times has he jumped to coach?
Good point.
Because for him, it's the best coach is the next coach.
Exactly. I mean, I thought Aceto brought him in pretty damn good. Was it 2017 or something like that? But and then he moved on to the next guy and to the next guy. Never nails it.
No.
So that's a good example.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we can look at, again, it's not the exact same, but we look at every other sport. The NFL is another one. You see a coaching change and you see a philosophical approach to a team, and you go, wait a minute, they only changed 8 players and the head coach is different. And all of a sudden they went from, the 25th ranked defense to a top 7. It wasn't just those couple players. It's an entire mindset and the way that they approach everything that changes. Like you said, George, Phil Jackson is the best example of a coach. Listen, I grew up here in Chicago. Phil Jackson did not run the Bulls offense. It was Tex Winter who created their offense. Phil Jackson did not create very many on-floor and in-game plans. Okay, that was Michael Jordan. But Phil Jackson got that group to buy in and to be selfless, and his Zen-like techniques were individualized for each person and what they needed to maximize that person's potential. Isn't that coaching? Whatever you need to do to make that person the best version of themselves. So one guy may know all they need to know about chemicals. I think of how many people we know out there that are coaches that can get on threads and can recite frontwards and backwards medical terms like nobody's business and tell you why this supplement with this food and at this time is the right way and the only way, and everyone else is an idiot and they need to read and research more. And yet they can't get someone to win any damn show, let alone be considered a good coach. There's more of those people out there than we know what to deal with. It's because they're head cases. They're not coaches. They're someone who can read literature and can recite medical terms and know how they work and know how they're supposed to respond in a person's body, but they can't get someone to follow and can't get them to be successful. Is that a good coach?
Not at all. I mean,
but they have all the knowledge in the world.
Yeah, I think all of us are kind of smirking here because we all could think of different individuals that are like this. We see them on Instagram spouting knowledge all the time, but it's like, where's your roster and who's sticking with you?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, Chris is a perfect example of that, right? Aceto is a perfect example of that, right? I mean, I see on his Instagram live, people will be like, what peptides do I take? And he's like, I don't even know what a peptide is. You know what I mean? Like,
I think he kind of plays that up a little bit. I think he plays that up a little bit. I don't think he's like sitting here like, oh, well, you need to have X amount of novel decks to the ratio of master, whatever. I think he knows a little more than he lets on, but that's not the thing in his mind that's driving someone's prep. It's not what is driving their relationship. It's not, you know what I mean? Like the chemicals are this part over here, just like his diet, just like what he wants you doing training, just like how much cardio he's having you doing,
sleep,
just like the rest, the recovery, when he's giving you days off, when he's using the magic muffins, I think it's obviously a system that's worked for 3 decades, as we've already kind of discussed. So it comes down to knowing his athletes, knowing how to coach in general. It's not about the chemicals though. We all have access to the same chemicals, right? I mean, mean, there's no super duper thing that Coach X has that came out of, Yugoslavia back in the day, and he's got a shipment of it in the back room, and he's sending to all his athletes. I mean, everyone's got access to the same chemicals, the same foods, the same supplements, the same, 24 hours in a day. It's all about, what you do with them, with the athlete.
So from that standpoint, do you still credit like Abdullah and Ahmed Oscar out of Oxygen?
Because the chicken?
Do you still give them credit, like, for being good coaches? Because a lot of people say
they won an Olympian title.
They won.
Right.
They won.
Something they're doing with their athletes is working.
Right.
If they're consistently having top 3, top 5 Olympian or Arnold Classic athletes, I mean, it's obviously working. But.
Right. It's only a matter of an opinion. Obviously it's an opinion. All of us who think we're ranking coaches, it's obviously just our opinion. But at the end of the day, what someone can't call an opinion is results, right? And whether one guy has what is perceived to be all the knowledge in the world and another one perceived to have almost no knowledge and has no business coaching, but if that person is getting results, people's opinion on their level of knowledge is irrelevant because it's working. So whatever it is that they're doing, whatever combination of resources they're using to get through to their athletes, if their athletes are successful, that is success.
Yeah, it comes down to application and results. You can't argue that.
Correct. Yeah. If you know all the answers to a test, but you took the test and you failed, you failed. I mean,
yeah.
Guys, this has been a blast. Very, very. I think this panel, if anything, gets people to think. I don't think any of us were trying to get anyone to be on a particular side per se. I think we all just opened everybody's perspective to a lot of different conversations. And I will say it does seem that we are in consensus in our top 3 for the Mount Rushmore, right? We're all agreed. We're going to put a poll out for the 4th. Are we going to use the 3 names then? Or are we opening it up to anybody?
I think we should do the 3 names that we decided on, because I think that this panel here encompasses a lot of generations, a lot of bodybuilding knowledge. You know what I mean? I think that 4th name is the one that's open to consensus. I think the first 3 that we talked about have proven themselves. That's my opinion.
Okay. We'll put it up to vote for those top 3. I think that there was some very good conversation here on how people are going to look at things and perceive things. At the very most, you're certainly going to think a little bit more. Whether you agree or disagree is irrelevant, but opening up thought processes is always the point. George, you're going to have to do this again.
Yeah, man. Like I always say, take the information, use the information. Everybody on the panel, has had success. Everybody's experienced. So, take this information when you are looking for a coach and consider some of the things that we talked about. This is the new King's Court. This is what we're doing. We expanding, on all other divisions, not all other divisions, but, more bodybuilding divisions or whatever. So just look forward to seeing more of this. I'd like to thank everybody for coming on, spending your time or whatever. And, I can't, hopefully, this situation that we under with the virus or whatever comes to a close, and I can get to see you guys like I always do. So for myself, my guest, Mandus Buckle and Maximum Muscle Report, this is the King's Court. We'll see you next time.